We are being recorded. Here we go. All right. So I think everybody here does know Megan, who is the site manager at Currituck Beach Lighthouse and has been for quite some time. And I have heard some of these stories about raising a young family at the lighthouse, but some of you might not have. And I'm sure that we will be entertained and educated. So this is another one of our education in what is it? Intercation, whatever it is, programs where
Education.
yeah, something like that. Anyhow, Megan, take it away.
Well, and it's funny because, usually I don't talk a lot about me or Luis or our kids because really my job has a period of interpretation here for this lighthouse and it's not about us. And so I've tried over the years to, a lot of people are always like, you should have a blog now these days, you should have a TikTok, Megan. And I'm always like, absolutely not. I will not. It is not so much our story, right? Like, yes, it is cool that the Outer Banks Conservationist has, well, I mean, in some ways before their time, a vision for a work plan that involves housing their employees, which if you don't do in Corolla these days, you're going to shut down because there's a lot of work to do and no housing for anyone to do it for you. So that's been a mainstay of the Outer Banks Conservationists for a long time. And as a result, we have a lighthouse keeper family living here for the past 16 and a half years, 17 summers. I know it doesn't count to 17 years, but when you're counting summers, I feel like it does. So I probably would have given you a very different presentation, except for Fox News Charlotte called me the other day and they said, Megan, we're showing up at 5 in the morning and we're going to follow you around. And I said, hell, you're not following me around. She's like, no, we're going to. We'll be there at 5:15. If you're not up that early, that's fine. I'm like, I may be a modern day lighthouse keeper, but I do not want to see you at 5:15 in the morning. I don't want to see anybody. And I will definitely not be awake at 5. I'm awake from like 2 to 5, but by 5:15, I'm falling back
Where do you
asleep.
go to
Lady.
cast it up there? I forget. Where do you?
Okay, sorry about that. Let me pin you. Okay.
No, I got it. Oh, okay. And I'll share a screen in a second too.
Okay.
But anyway, she was a very pushy Fox News Charlotte woman, and she was lovely. It turned out we had a great time together and we had so much fun, and her photographer was wonderful too. And then I was like, okay, fine. Here are pictures of my life. You can have them. And I don't know when that's going to air on Fox News, but I figured, well, if I shared them with Fox News, I might as well share them with the Outer Banks Lighthouse Society, at least even in advance. So we have not seen what she's going to do with them, but I put a lot of pictures together. So let me do a screen share for you all. Let's do that. And then let me get into play from current slide. Okay, can everybody see this?
I can.
Oh, I'm going to assume you can because we've got you all muted. Okay, shout or here. And Bet, do you have a chat box open?
I think
okay, and I'll move a chat box over there too in case people need to jump in or have questions. Okay, then we will move this over there. Okay, and nobody can see my little like mute thing, I think. Okay. Gosh, hold on. Don't start us yet. Okay, anyway, 16 plus years of lighthouse keeping at the Currituck Beach Lighthouse for the Outer Banks Conservationists and the Outer Banks Lighthouse Society is my presentation here. Now I'm going to skip over some of this. I wasn't sure how many people would jump on this call, but I feel like everyone we saw here actually knows where the Currituck Beach Lighthouse is and knows where Corolla is. I'm going to minimize this so I can see my own. There we go. Hide those thumbs. Gosh, hold on. I'm clicking too. Hold on. Go back. There we go. Okay. Again, many of you have listened to me speak or read things that I've put together, but at some point in the 1850s and then again in the 1870s, it was determined that this one important and only unlighted part of the Atlantic coast from Maine to Florida really finally needed a light in it, a coastal light, and they needed it to be a first order, even though in the 50s they thought it might get away with being a second order. So by the number of shipwrecks there were and the timing, they determined Currituck Beach Lighthouse could be built, and it says here it would be halfway between Cape Henry and Bodies Island Light. Hold on, let's do that.
I'd like to remind people to mute themselves.
I just threw up here, you know, some of our drawings of everything that you would see here, except for, wait for my next slide too, which is essentially the exterior, R9 landings, our first order keeper's house, which was built 4 times in the United States, framed elsewhere, and my office, which also had a twin, where now our little keeper's house, or what people call our museum shop or gift shop is, which as far as I can tell is unique to this site, even though the site itself is replicated with a keeper's house and the tower, at least identically at Morris Island, and with the tower, you know, we're the last, I think, replica. Well, Morris Island is finished after we are, but the last of this Body Island plans to be built. And then a cross section here in the middle. The one thing that I've really just started focusing on, thanks to actually the United States Lighthouse Society, which has so many resources online, I was able to look at a lot of photographs of a lot of light stations, and not one time in the United States of America and am I able to find a brick walkway, this elliptical double brick with a curb on it, with a brick curb that we have here at Currituck. And so I really started just mentioning that it is planetarily unique after talking with a SCAD professor who has a PhD in sidewalks, who said I could go ahead and make that claim. So anyway, you've been here and seen it, but it may just feel like an uneven brick walkway. It's more special than that. Here's a early drawing of it. 1873 is the number we have over our front door, but December 1st, 1875 is in fact our birthday, which is why we just celebrated 146 years. I do love this image. You know, these light lists often have images from the water that help identify. But, you know, if you were going to sail past our lighthouse today, there is no chance you would see our keeper's house from the water. Oh, and I do like this quote too. The coast at Currituck Beach presents an almost unbroken beach of hard white sand with frequent ranges and clusters of sand hills, varying in height from 10 to 80 feet, backed here and there by scattered clumps of trees and occasional patches of wood. Less beautifully stated here in this 1891 book that says, it is drearily situated among high and glittering sandhills on the coast, destitute of vegetation and utterly unpicturesque. And here we have an image of it. This is 1893. This is a Bamber photograph long before the WPA comes out, which for Corolla is 1940, to start building dunes. And then we have a huge washover with the Ash Wednesday storm in 1963, at which point around 13 miles of sand fence around this tower and on the beach is placed. So that really changes just how much greenery and how utterly unpicturesque we are. But here back in the day, you can see here's the fence line running all the way from the keeper's house to the front of the lighthouse. It looks like where there's a Y in our brick, those are where some gates are to get in front of the light, to get inside the lighthouse. You will notice, interestingly, that our front door did not used to be white. Oh, I should have brought this up for you. There is, in about this time in the 1890s, a newspaper article that I found recently, in fact, when I went through all those newspaper.com's article, that said, in fact, the interior of our lighthouse was both green and red. And I don't know if y'all can see me, but I did flake some paint off our lens room door recently. And that sure as heck looks like some rusted red paint color to me. So I'm going to do a little more research on that. But, you know, the new Cape Henry Lighthouse is red inside. We're currently green. Others are black, but it's a little bit Christmassy, the whole red and green combo, and it strikes me as unusual, but I'm not saying it didn't happen. So anyway, we're looking a little bit at some of the lives of keepers just by the fact that we can see like a guinea fowl or some sort of hen bird here and a horse. The fence line goes all the way behind the lighthouse as well. And we know that animals were kept penned up here on site, which we still do today, actually, behind the lighthouse. Neither of our goats are still alive right now, but we do have chickens. Two just got eaten the other day, but somebody's always bringing us some animals to keep here on site. And in fact, we still do it behind the lighthouse. It's just that there are so many more trees now, so it does not look, in fact, like this anymore. Here's another image from a different angle. If you look over on the left side, it certainly looks like an animal pen. And here we have some keepers, in fact. This is, again, the Bamber photograph taken. So we've got the principal keeper on the closed side. And I met a family, they don't think they're related, but they pronounce their last name Pennant, like rhymes with pennant. So I decided to go with that. And on the far side, Fabius Simpson and William Riley Austin. I do like that at some point, actually, after, there's a lot of drama, and I'm sure many of you have heard me speak about the 1870s, 1880s drama that goes on with our keepers. And in 1880, there's 24 people living in our keeper's house. So during COVID, when I wasn't trying to teach my kid trigonometry, which if you're thinking, wow, that's cool, Meghan knows trigonometry, I don't either. But I tried to teach him anyway. We got like a 54 best case scenario, I think. We were so proud of ourselves. That's more than half of all the trigonometry known by us. But I also had a lot of time to research every one of our lighthouse keepers, and then sort of do cross sections of who was living where, when, and what the journals said based on who was living there at the time. And after the first, say, 10 years and 24 people in the house, the next sort of round of keepers are all bachelors. So you go from having 24 people in the house total, it's a duplex. So principal keeper on one side and two assistants and their families on the other, to 3 bachelors. And I'm sure that the Lighthouse board was really pleased for a while. Of course, they don't stay bachelors long, but I imagine that it was a very different feeling in the household. In fact, when we had ICC here recently, it was just 3 or 4 guys living in the house, and it felt a lot to me like it might have felt just at that time. Let's see here. Can we get this to keep moving? There we go. Remember that Currituck not only has families at it, but it's kind of it's the place you want to be, because soon, by the 1890s, we don't only have a chapel, we have a schoolhouse, we have a post office. So here's a quote from Keeper George Johnson, who does end up coming to Currituck. And in some ways, much to his regret, things go very bad in the Johnson life from that point on, with the loss of a son and then a niece, and then they move and lose 2 more sons. But in the case of a vacancy in the position of second assistant keeper at Currituck Beach Lighthouse Station, I would thank you very much if you would transfer me to that station. I have 3 small children, which I would like to send to school, but I cannot them here, for the nearest school is 6 miles from here. And he's saying that at Cape Henry. Now, of course, at that time, it's not, you coming down from Cape Henry in 1912, it's just a straight shot down the beach. These days, if I want to go climb Cape Henry Lighthouse, I got to drive all the way up through Currituck mainland, up to the base up there through Chesapeake. But at that time, it was only 30 miles down the beach. Not to say it was easy, but it was more of a straight shot. You all know the realities of keeping the light burning. But in our case, it was certainly early on. You had bodies washing up on shore. You had the trauma of caring for survivors, disease. We know that one of our lighthouse keepers' daughter's husband, soon after they get married, she's only 16 when she marries him, he dies of typhoid pretty early on. George Johnson's son, George Jr., dies of pneumonia. The letting the light go out, the Charleston earthquake can't have been fun here. They felt it here. The cohabitation, although it is actually one of the Johnson children and an Austin child, kids of lighthouse keepers who do cross lines and get married and have families that inhabit Corolla for a long time. So that part does work out well. But also the isolation and the day sleeping, it's not easy. I told you about that. I just like to throw some primary sources your way. But that's the 1880 census telling us about the 24 people living here. Early, but not too early. I think this is getting toward the point maybe where lighthouse keepers are going to become obsolete here at our station. But this is our Corolla Schoolhouse, which is again a school and looks almost, minus that big stove right there. This is pretty much what it looks like even today. Lots of stuff on the walls. Here's just information on when we get our first post office, March 6th, 1895, and our first postmaster was a woman, as is today, Emma V. Parker. I put together in order a list of all of the lighthouse keepers who ever served here, and I highlighted the principal keepers and then threw on, so 24 total who carry oil to the top of our lighthouse is sort of how I think about that. There on the PDF we have online, we mention others who are associated with this, including William Tate and Lloyd Gaskell, but at that point, they're no longer stationed here. Then for a long time, we have a lamplighter, that's Gene Austin, who was the sheriff in Corolla. So once this lighthouse is electrified and automated and doesn't need a battery charge from the Coast Guard coming over the Currituck Sound, Gene Austin is just here to make sure that it's turning itself on and the photosensor is working, and he reports to the Coast Guard otherwise. And eventually I think they get the feeling that he's done with the job. And soon after, OBC comes in and forms, well, in 1980, forms the Outer Banks Conservationist, saves the keeper's house, and eventually hires a woman named Debbie Wessner, who is altogether capable, from removing lead-based paint in the lighthouse to wrangling horses. And then we moved to Lloyd Childers, who did come to our 146th birthday party this week, and who is actually the person who worked at the Department of Cultural Resources in Raleigh when John Wilson and Bill Parker were hoping to lease the property here within the fence. She was the grant administrator there. So when she retired from the state, they approached her about taking over Debbie's job. Then Jen and John, who I think a lot of you probably knew, with Pat Riley, who has since passed away, as their assistant. And then Luis and I arrived here in 2005. Inside our archives room, we have, people think, oh, are these all your principal keepers? And I say, no, these are the keepers we have photographs of. But this is our last principal keeper, Homer Treadwell Austin, and his wife, Orphea. They served here for about 10 years before all keepers are removed from site, because of electrification and automation. People do love that hat that Orphea is wearing, though there is some indication that it is hats like those that caused the Carolina parrot to go extinct. By 1955, the Virginian Pilot and the Portsmouth Star put out a newspaper article about, are you sick of living in a big city? Look at this very undercrowded school we have. I think at this point, what year is this? 1955. I think there's 8 kids at our school here. And by 1958, there are going to be 2, and they shut it down entirely. Here's an image from 1962. You can see that Corolla is like well on its way, if this is any indication, to becoming kind of a ghost town. There's these barracks right next to, or this house directly south of the tower. And I did hear from the widow of a man who worked for the Navy, who was here from August of 1959 to June of 1960, and stayed in that house with 2 other people. There was some speculation that maybe it was a Loran station, but the more I learn about Loran, the more it becomes clear that that is not what was going on here. It was just some sort of radar at the top of the lighthouse, but I don't know much more than that. But you can see they're mowing the lawn, and our planetarily unique brick walkway is still visible. The cistern, the north cistern, has been completely demolished, and the yard certainly looks like people have been removing things from it, but at least my office, so we know in 1962, my office is still intact. Soon afterwards, someone is going to pick it up and move it down the road. Here by 1980 is what our keeper's house looks like. And here's John Wilson, who I think really hates when I take his picture. So I only can do it when he's not looking at me. And Bill Parker, actually, at the top of the lighthouse, more recently looking at the work that ICC had done here in the background of that top picture. But John Wilson is the great grandson of Homer Treadwell Austin, our last oil carrying lighthouse keeper. And he's the one whose mother spent time with her grandparents here. Her Homer Treadwell Austin had many children, and the top daughter had a child at the same time Orphea had a daughter. So although that's an aunt and a niece, they're sort of raised as twin cousins. And so John's mother spends summers out here, kind of like Body Island lighthouse keepers who live in Manio, or whose family will live in Manio. John Wilson's family lived in Manio while Homer Treadwell Austin was a lighthouse keeper, but at least his granddaughter would come spend summers here when she was out of school. This is Debbie Wessner. I told you about her accepting. Oh, look at her. She's barefoot. I love that. That is part for some people. I'm kind of a shoe wearer because I don't love the sand spurs, but it looks like she was tougher than I am. I told you, Debbie Wessner was tough. I would love it. The last we knew, she maybe ran off with the roofer we had here and moved to Montana. So if anybody knows her, we'd love to get stories out of her. And then Lloyd Childers, who I swear does not age. Look at that. This is her in probably, I don't even know. Let's go with 1995. And here she is just last week. Still has her old jacket. Jen and John, I just like these pictures of them. They were only here for about 2 years, but I do think they went to a lighthouse convention, maybe in Florida, that some of you went to. So here's Jen in the lens room for a snow. And and a cracked glass. This is very interesting. If you can see to our left, but to her right, one of those panes of glass is cracked. We are hoping that is not part of our future, given the isolation of our dissimilar metals that we just finished up there. And then there are Luis and I think as soon as we got here, you can see a little baby carriage in front. Maybe, I don't think we made Benicio take the picture because he's not even one. I don't remember who took that picture. But you'll see, we're going to age a little bit over time. There's Benicio, who's about 10 months old when we moved here, and in the background, a weeping willow, which did not make it very long. The trees on the site love to fall over. I have a feeling that the tower creates its own wind patterns sometimes during big storms, and a lot of these red maples behind us fell over in various storms, actually. Yeah, that's probably our first week when the board of directors comes and says, oh, actually, it's not our first week, it's 4th of July. Sorry. This is our second month here when we're living in the keeper's house. We initially moved into the keeper's house and lived there for a few years. Just a story of Benicio growing up. This beach ramp doesn't even look like this anymore. Ooh, it has all sorts of handicap access now, but there it is, kid growing up at the beach. There's Luis and Jack. I think Jack McComb must have brought him this t-shirt. I wish I could see it, but I'm sure some of you will recognize it. It might, maybe not, maybe it's a Currituck Beach Lighthouse shirt, but I have a feeling because it looks so nicely folded that it arrived here with John Gaskell and Jack McCombs. John Gaskell, as you know, is a kid who grew up at the Body Island Lighthouse. So I thought I'd throw him in for Lighthouse Keeper continuation as he is no longer with us. Oh, look, I thought Bet needed to come on in here too. Bet, if you want to unmute yourself, I cannot remember who that National Park Service rep is, but maybe he was more important than just the guy working that day. Unfortunately, I cannot remember that.
I don't recognize him at all.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, well, no, don't worry, but there we are, you know. A while ago, Benicio looking a mess growing up. And that big tree behind him fell over in, let me try and remember, Dorian, I think. And instead of falling onto that house and crushing it, it fell in the other direction. About 11 trees fell in that storm, all in the same direction, which made me feel like we had created our own little tornado here. Oh, that's us with the pregnancy test. And which means us inside the keeper's house. We had a fan in there. It gets really hot still in the summer in there. And that means we got Palo on our way. So there it is. Now we're 4 living in the keeper's house. We This is before Body Island opened. So this is 2007. We were allowed to go and check it out. There's Paolo, who's now 15 and at boarding school, in fact, because this town got too small for him, he said. There's Benicio, John, to make you happy, painting some stripes on a lighthouse. There they are, just going at it back when we had big incandescent bulbs here in the tower. Running around with no clothes on. There we are. Look at that cutie. That's my 15-year-old these days, 6'2" now. Everybody's had braces. Now that's back when they were trying to look like boarding school kids at a wedding here. Hold on, let me get this thing. I don't know if y'all can see this, but we'll move it out of the way. Just hanging out. Oh, now I gotta click on there. That was, gosh, right? 12, no, how old are we now? 146, 11 years ago, but still, that was a great cake. Oh, in fact, our friend who just died last week was the baker in town, but his wife made this for us, and we've never been able to have that excellent of a cake again. She made the entire thing out of Rice Krispie treats on top of a cake. I just thought it was fabulous. Kids eating that cake. Hurricanes. There's Luis. You can see everybody's getting older. Oh, another hurricane. Some of y'all may remember our sweet dog. There we are at Body Island. I don't know if that's its first or its second iteration of getting some scaffolding up, but someone gave us a dog. I told you people give us animals, and somebody decided, I'm going to give you a Bernese Mountain Dog. And it was a lovely treat for so long. We got her when she was 4. She died 2 years ago at 11 and a half. So we could not have been happier. And she loved to go see lighthouses. Then we headed out. We had to go see St. Augustine. And then most recently this spring, we had to go see some of our twins in California and Oregon. There we are, Luis and I. So Luis believes that we arrived on Cinco de Mayo, and as he is, I'm not sure we did. I think we got here either on 3rd or the 7th. But on Cinco de Mayo, we always go up and celebrate an anniversary here. That was this year. And then here we have some children of mine. Look, I've got an arrow pointing at Benicio. A kid turned 17, having spent his entire childhood on the ground. And then 1, 2, 3, 4 to his right, to my left is Paolo, who you saw growing up, and now he's taller than everybody. He was the pregnancy test kid that you all met that way. Just thought I'd walk us through animals that we grew up seeing here on the beach. Some wild horses come see us. They're not supposed to, but with some frequently they decide to get through a gate and come visit us. They do love our winter ryegrass, that is for sure. A snapping turtle. A sweet little maybe, a yellow-bellied slider. We had roosters, because people love to give us animals. For a while, we had 3 roosters. Oh, no, right there, it's 2. Oh, and a guinea hen in the back. I love guinea hen. They're ridiculous, and they get murdered so easily here because you cannot tell them what to do. And we have so many wild animals, from coyote to raccoon to possum to fox. If you don't get in your coop at night, you're not going to be long for this world. Some of y'all may remember Stevo El Chivo, that goat right there. Those are kids somehow thinking Steve would like to play with a slinky, I guess. Kitties. We don't have any kitties running around anymore because the coyotes learned all about them. Steve trying to get in the lighthouse. These days, squirrels try to get in our lighthouse. Oh, just a little seal resting with us. That was our big adventure back in 2010. When what we think is the oldest shipwreck ever found on the southeast mid-Atlantic, I don't remember what query they used for this, but I think we have to exclude Florida, I'm quite sure, in old shipwrecks. But this was a shipwreck that was getting thrown around the beach, and we got state permission to remove it and put it on OBC property. And that was great. We had hundreds of volunteers show up from anywhere, Delaware, North Carolina. People came from everywhere. The fire station brought out machinery. And it sat with us for a little while before the state decided to move it to a state museum, which was a shame. Part of what I do is make sure I have educated and capable and kind employees who are going to work as docents here at the Lighthouse. So this was a good early on picture of our docents having a party in the keeper's house. Oh, and pretty early on, we do have some events here. We often, or we did for years, have a Creepy and Corolla event. But after doing it for about 16 years, this year I was like, you know what, I'm not doing it. Everyone else in this town can do a trunk or treat. This is about our 4th year having a trunk or treat. And I said, thanks to COVID, we're not coming in the keeper's house. We're not going in the lighthouse altogether. We're just going to trunk or treat. So I got to go have a trunk instead of running an event. And it was super fabulous. And I think we may just stick with that. Sorry, if you were great lovers of the Lighthouse Halloween event, we may have exhausted ourselves from doing it too well. This may be the year we tried to throw a baby off a line, a baby ghost, I will say. That did not work out well. And then, of course, our Christmas event, which, as I mentioned, for those of you here earlier, we're having trouble finding. And I actually think that Christmas lights are part of this. We're having, what do people always say when everything is backed up in shipping containers? Anyway, that may be, we'll see. We always pull something off for winter holidays, but so far, just a few strands around here. There is a big Corolla illumination going on. If you happen to be looking for something to do the next Friday and Saturdays, Twitty Realty, which is to the north of us in the village, and the county put some big grants together to illuminate the village. And I haven't posted much about it on the Lighthouse Facebook page because we don't have that many lights or wreaths up. But if you happen to need a weekend away, the next 2 weekends are going to be beautiful here. Just an example of what our summers look like. People who want to come climb a lighthouse. This year, we would have had so many people climbing, but we had a max capacity. So we never let more than 33 people in a time. And I actually closed down the artifacts room so people could just access hand sanitizer, but not gather. So we'll see what happens in the course of the next year with some variance and whether I can get that room open again and raise our max a little bit. This is getting toward September and on. Just, we had to move, or not that we had to, but we chose to really move a lot of what we did outside. Overall, if you look at this bottom left picture, I don't love to have signage on a big easel like this, just because if we're going to be a historically accurate site, we've always tried to limit signage, but we used to force people to sign our waiver with a pen, and nobody wanted to touch the same pen that other people were going to touch. And we really had to let them know that there is some risk in climbing a tower that does not meet modern day building code. I mean, even with our front steps with no handrail, we have to let them know ahead of time. So we moved everything outside. You can see the guy on the bottom left, that's Andy. We even got an iPad, got some wireless inside the lighthouse, and moved our holding outside so that everybody could have fresh air as much as possible. Another part of what I do, since we were talking about work and play and growing up, of course, is research. I love to do this part, but it is hard for me to be like, let's run a site and do all the research and put it in writing. But don't worry, I'm going to be here long enough to get it all to you all. So but also, right, in the meantime, I thought, wouldn't it be a good idea to open a school? And if that ever occurs to you, it's kind of like buying a lighthouse. Maybe you should think twice about how good of an idea it actually is. But the school, which I showed you a little while ago back in the, I think, 30s, is in fact a school again. And if you look at this bottom right-hand picture, this is our current school year. And if any of you has $100,000 that you did not know what to do with, we're about to launch a capital campaign to build in the parking lot to the north of the schoolhouse, not attached to the schoolhouse in any way. But we would love to have that because otherwise we're sort of stuck. And because of COVID and because if you build it, they will come. We have a lot of humans who live in Corolla now. The whole ghost town that we were looking at in the 1960s is no longer the case. We went from about 500 residents to now we have 900 registered voters in 27927, which is pretty nuts. Then we get into Luis, who loves more than anything groundskeeping, and painting. So every, I'd say 6 years or so, he does a full repaint of our steps, but tries to touch them up in the meantime. Keeper's housework. What he can't do, he'll contract out. Even this, look how young everybody looks in this picture. Look how young Luis doesn't have any gray hair in this picture. Neither does Bill Parker here on the right. Wow. Anyway, these are guys doing carpentry work on the Keeper's house for us. And we did a big carpentry project 2019, 2020, as you can see. The front, one of our front porches, the south front porch, if you ever get a chance, really had a lot of rotten wood on it. But if we ordered pretty standardized wood, tongue and groove, to replace it. And when these carpenters came, they said, Meghan, this wood varies in width. And that's in some ways what makes it not only look original, but look so neat. We have to send back the wood we ordered and order various sizes to replicate your porch. And so that's what we did. Also, we found the counterweights in the windows, which are no longer in use right now, but I didn't even know they were still in hiding. So that was fun. And then ICC came in the spring or late winter, spring of 2020. So they get here in February, they leave March 11th. Every single morning that they were here for a little while, the wild horses decided to come and visit them. And you can see there's some scaffolding up at the top on that the picture on the left. For those of you, at least John, who know them, in that middle picture below, that's Roy and Kim, and then Kim on the right, working on our 2 lower belt courses, which in our case are iron. In body is not iron, but for a variety of reasons, it was taking on water because of cracks. And so we had them shore that up. Here's some pictures of that work. The middle picture is the most interesting, where they had to remove metal, fix it, Belzona it. Oh, and the bottom left picture I like too. You can see that almost every piece of iron that we find here, when you remove enough paint from it, has a Roman numeral 1 through 16. That's true for the plates in our gallery, in our lower but up gallery or top gallery, not the lantern gallery, but the public gallery. And they all line up. So that's fun. Anyway, then they, after did all the work shoring it up and sealing it, then they primed and painted and clear coated it for us. And that top picture, middle picture, you can see they're on their way to finishing. While they were here, they removed the cornice pieces that were in the best shape, which in our case is on the southwest side, because it doesn't get the northeast wind and salt pounding it. And they removed some of our brackets for recasting in iron. And then all of our cornice pieces, which were cast in stainless, all 16 of the cornice pieces were redone. Only a few of the brackets were redone, and all of the ladder bars were redone. And they said, okay, great. We're going to send them to the OK Foundry in Richmond. We will be back in 6 weeks. And then we were going to open the lighthouse 2 days later. They left a whole bunch of wood at the top, just assuming that within 6 weeks they'd be back. But you all were alive for how that story went. This is what our poor tower looked like from March of 2020 until July, when they got back and set the scaffold up again. It drove me nuts. It would have been so much easier just to let them take it down, but it doesn't matter. I do like when you're able to date photographs based on interesting little details, so that when people in the future will know. Here's Roy with a recast bracket, and Kim. I just apparently like pictures where people look like saintly, and I just love that picture of Kim. And then we're open, and people are doing what they do and getting married in masks. Oh, we thought we'd throw in a little John Havel Benicio photograph. Oh, darn it, John, you've got a beer in your hand. I try to hide beer in photographs. And the sign that John brought, because we were closed for the summer of 2020, had some serious concerns about having enough money to bring ICC back to pay for that contract. And they could not have been more generous with the flexibility for us. Which, looking back, if everyone decides not to pay you because they don't have any money, doesn't do companies like ICC any good. So we were thrilled that they are still doing the work they do. Here, I believe, is Kim's arm trying to remove cornice piece. I include this picture on the left because there were, for those of you who live on the Outer Banks, I'll just assume you're nodding with me when I say the number of bugs this summer. And in our case, midges turned to spiders. I think eating the midges was just ungodly. Every time you turn around, there were this many spiders on something. And then we thought we didn't like the spiders, but then it turned into this. I'm going to play this for you. Oh, wait, hold on. I want to pause this. Can you see the wasps? That is what those poor ICC guys had to deal with, which turns out was maybe even better than when it was cold and windy on them. Here's Roy getting the cornice pieces finalized. Look how good this looks. And our seals caulked. Dave Halleck and his assistant Mark came to check things out because they're always doing a lot of work here. Once they finished with the cornice pieces, they moved onto the cast iron jambs for our windows, which may not seem like a lot of work, but was incredibly intense to find a way to blast. And in fact, in the picture on the right, you can see, oh, there might have been a slight error in the sponge blasting. You can see this line going straight up and down, which means the protection they tried to use to protect everything around these windows was not always foolproof. On the marble under our windows, it was almost entirely protected. But you can see that line where they took this sponge jet blaster in order to get the rust off of our jams and off of our hardware. Well, our hardware wasn't rusted, but to get it clean in order to treat it. And, you know, everyone who says that things are going to be dustless apparently means less than sandblasting, but not dustless. Here's a picture of what our windows looked like before. And you can see they definitely needed some work, and then we're getting some work done on them, and they were looking good. And look how beautiful they look now. Every time I see them, I'm over maybe the desire to cry, but only just. Then wildly, we decided to tell the movie people that they could come. They said, okay, tell us the scaffold's going to be down. We said, yes, 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 the scaffold's definitely going to be down. But nobody said, is the big metal arm that ICC uses also going to be down? And it definitely wasn't down. So that took a little bit of work to get this. This movie is called Breakwater, and they wouldn't tell me much about it. And then when I went in the other day on our birthday to make sure the lens room was clean, look at this, I found their script. If they ever become a big movie, I'm holding on to this, gonna sell it on eBay. Anyway, I'll let you eventually discover what happens in Breakwater, but we let them use it. There's me. You see me in that bottom left picture looking like a Hollywood director. I'm sure you can agree. And these guys, these photographers, freaking out, apparently very afraid of heights, and some tape in front of them on that bottom right picture where it says new. Let's see it. So, oh, new laminate done. There were some old laminate, new laminate, and old glass. But what they did was they separated the dissimilar metals with everything they could, with tape, and even the screws that they used then had a gel on them so that at no point is the iron touching bronze, rusting, which is what causes that glass to crack. Just some more photos of what went on. Oh, and that top right picture where where these socks are hanging, there was just no way to get rid of those wasps. But somebody said mothballs would work. I want you to know mothballs do not work. And what they do is stink up your entire lens room and look really goofy when you steal your kids' soccer socks to hang them on your new ladder bars. But that's what's going on in that picture. Of course, no project is ever complete without running into a problem. So they did the top row of windows first, fine, got rid of the rust, separated the metals, second middle layer done, came back after the movie people left and realized that these bars were not going to fit back on of the bottom part, because if you look at that left picture where there's a big cavity there, that was all rust. And so it was rust jacking. So they had done all of this work, but when they were going to try and screw these bronze pieces back in, they were going to bend them to get them over the rust. So we had to actually do an addendum to our contract to get that work done, because that is not the separation of dissimilar metals. That is the removing and the patching up of ironwork. So that's a progression on the left of the removal, and then the belzoning, and then the painting and the priming and the clear, or whatever, in reverse. This is a picture where you can see at the top right, the bronze pieces have been returned and some have been removed for work on them, and one is still looking pretty junky, just to give you a feeling of how that worked. Top's done, moving toward the middle layer, and you can see our one remaining bullseye panel there. Finally taken some wood down after it'd been there for many months. Oh, then we had a party, our 146th. It was not very well attended. I certainly learned that if you want to say free climb, 200 to 800 people will show up. If you say climb for a donation, 70 people will show up, and half of them didn't know you were having a party. So that's how that worked. Plus, you just have to enjoy that little picture on the left, because I got a new, I guess if you're recording this, I don't need to do a plug for the massive corporation whose phone I own, but I'm pleased that you can zoom out and sort of fisheye on that lens room in there. It was fun for me to be able to see that whole thing, which has never happened before. And that indeed is the end of my photographic presentation. Hold on, let's see how long oh gosh, 46 minutes, Bet. I knew I could talk a long time. Darn it, y'all. Anyway, many hands do indeed make light work. And I will stop sharing right there. And there you go. That's some life and fun and work at the Currituck Beach Lighthouse.
That was great.
Travis!
Yes.
How's it going, Travis? You must have logged in after I disappeared.
It's a few minutes late. It's good to see you. That was great, Megan. Thank you.
You know, it is what it is. That was essentially you all having to sit at my house and look through a photo album with me.
Which was great. I imagine some folks might have some questions, so if you want to unmute yourselves, and I'm going to go back to our gallery view so we can see who's talking. Okay?
I can see that John's got his hands up.
John,
of course.
Okay, John.
First of all, thank you, Megan. That was a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful overview of your life and everything in it. What month and year were the Breakwater movie people there, and how long were they there?
Great question. So the month they were here was October, I believe it was, and of 2021. I think it was like the 27th, 28th, and 29th that they were here. They were actually only on site for 2 days, and I had to be hard on them because, of course, I wasn't going to let them hang out if there was going to be thunder, but we never close to the public when we say we're going to be open. And we made an exception. We made them come midweek when we were going to be less busy. And people were very forgiving. And actually, the town had a lot of fun having that many people with that many 18-wheelers with that much stuff here in this town. So it was kind of exciting. But
you don't know, do you know what role the lighthouse plays in the movie, or don't you know? Well, you have the script, so.
I do have the script. But I did sort of have the idea that there's a woman, she works at our local bookstore. There is something going on. Maybe her dad is in prison and he's trying to track her down, but maybe he sent a ne'er-do-well. This is probably totally wrong because they were very hush-hush about it, but they're at the top of the lighthouse to look to find somebody trying to find one of them. That's all, maybe her. Okay. It's a very short scene in the lighthouse in which I explained to them that in case it was going to become a cult classic, we were not going to have too much love or hate or death or cussing, right? It didn't feel like, the gum wall in Seattle, that everybody needs to go have a gum wall. I just didn't need this to be replicated in any way. And they promised me none of those major items were part of the script. So it worked out.
Were you aware that there was a separate movie filmed at Old Baldy this summer?
I was aware that there was another movie that it was
a Hallmark movie, and it actually aired in September.
Oh.
And there's one
Then-
at Oak Island also, was filmed at Oak Island Lighthouse.
The same one, the
No.
Hallmark one.
I don't know.
No, because the Hallmark one featured the Old Baldy Lighthouse inside, and the story was around the Old Baldy Lighthouse. So that's amazing that 3 movies at 3 North Carolina lighthouses.
Well, and of course there was Outer Banks Netflix, which purported to take place on the Outer Banks.
No, that was
But
South Carolina.
That's right. And
Yeah, they
then
used the Hunter Island Lighthouse and a couple of one of the others.
that's right. Yeah, Hunting
I've
Island.
never actually watched it.
Oh, it's again, if you're recording this, it's addictive. Let's put it that way. Once you start, even though you don't want to watch it, you might find yourself watching all of them until 3 a.m. But the same week that we were doing this filming here, another movie people called and said, we're freaking out. We were supposed to film at Body Island and then something changed. Can we come to you? I was like, no, you can't. Sorry.
So
Wow.
And John, did you have a second question? Was that 2 questions or 1 question?
No, I'm done.
Aida's got a question.
Aida, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Great presentation. Loved it, loved it, loved it.
Thank you.
You mentioned something about finding counterweights, and I saw a picture of them. I could ask my husband, but I'd rather ask you. What are counterweights?
Sure. When you open a window, right? So you open the window and at the top, they're on, in fact, I'm sure I can find some pictures because that is actually the system we use for our double sashed windows in the lighthouse. So we have 2 sashes, and this sash at the bottom could go up or this could go down. Now, we didn't actually do the work to allow these currently to go down because they were not in that shape. So we just now have this bottom sash when it can go up. And as it goes up, there's a cord on it that goes around a little
Pulley or something.
a pulley, and then the weights go down. Hold on, let me just see if I can
got you.
easily find. Anyway,
So what did you do with the counterweights that you found?
we left them in there.
Oh.
So they're in the keeper's house windows, but those windows, when someone replaced them, they just replaced them with windows that just go up on and down.
I
on
see.
tracks.
So these are
and so
used
they're
in
not.
they're used in old houses.
Okay.
Yeah, but I would love to get our counterweights back working in the keeper's house too. But I just am not allowed to suddenly put new projects on budgets. So down the road, John.
Aida, when you and I came down here in the early 2000s, we were looking around with one of the rangers. I don't know who it was, if it was Doug or somebody else at the time, and we opened the closet in one of, I think it was the primary keeper's quarters, and there were the counterweights laying on the floor there, and some of the people actually thought that those were the weights that ran the lens, which was sort of ridiculous because the weights that ran the lens were 1,500 pounds, and these weigh about 15 pounds each. But I have pictures of the counterweights from Hatteras windows. They were common, and they're hidden behind the sashes in the walls.
Thank you, honey.
Very common in old houses.
I've got a few questions, I guess. First of all, I didn't know that there was such a thing as PhDs in sidewalks.
It is possible he has the only one, but he is Canadian and he works for SCAD. And I'm very grateful for the person who taught me about him.
Okay.
Well, I think his name is Michael Jackson. I could be wrong. I'm sorry if I'm wrong. He has a spectacular name, and it might be Michael Jackson, but if I'm wrong, it's something cool like that.
Okay. Another question. What is a Loran station?
It's a capital LORAN, all
Right.
caps. It's some sort of, you're going to have a huge antenna, and then you are satelliting or communicating or radaring something. That's a very weak answer. I don't know. Is a better answer.
It looks like John knows the answer.
John, take it away.
In 1939, when the U.S. Coast Guard, the second U.S. Coast Guard life-saving station was built on the back road behind Hatteras, right across the street from that, literally across the street, and there is still a path that goes into a swamp now because the building is gone. But in the 1950s, there was a Loran station there, and it stands for Long Range, LO, Long Range something navigation, and it's a form of radar. And I actually have the blueprints. There was a huge, I mean, it covered acres, antenna buried on the Outer Banks. That was a LORAN, part of the LORAN station, and that was later abandoned and replaced by the NAVFAS Navy facility north of the lighthouse. But it was searching for Russian and German submarines.
Okay. I had no idea, but this is great. I've got one more question, okay?
Sure.
What led you to want to apply for this job? I mean, did you graduate from college and say, I want to be a lighthouse keeper? Or,
Good question. So no, I graduated from college with a degree in ancient Greek translation.
oh, you need that to be a lighthouse keeper, right?
You sometimes need it, right? You never know when something about like Pharos or Alexandria might come up, right?
Well, you're right.
I had taken Latin in junior high and a little bit in high school. And it turns out that languages are the easy, if something had to be easy for me or easier for me than other people, it turns out that learning foreign languages is my gift. And so I just couldn't help myself. I have parents who are like, do whatever you want. If it's cool, do it. And I just loved I just loved it because it's not entirely different from lighthouse keeping in that you get clues to the fact that humans were alive and acting humanly long before us. And also it's a reminder of the fact that we will not last forever. And do we have reason to contribute to the knowledge base? So there are some ways that it matched my ongoing personality. But it turns out that I did not want to get a PhD in classics. I got a scholarship after I graduated from Carolina to go spend a year in Athens at the American School for Classical Studies. And with all due respect to the lovely classicists, I am maybe more of an extrovert. I'm what I refer to as a daytime extrovert. Don't bug me at night. I'm not going out with you. I'm not partying with you. Let me go home and read my book. But I'm a daytime extrovert. And a lot of classicists are a no time extrovert. And I have a lot of trouble being like, all of us are just nerding out all the time. So I decided I just couldn't keep going with classics. So then, of course, everyone was like, well, damn, Megan, what are you going to do with your life? You better become an attorney, right? Aida, that's what people tell you. She shakes her head.
Big mistake.
That's what every attorney told me. I went and worked for one for 2 years. She was like, you're going to go in business with me. We're going to make this happen. I was like, wow, I don't know that I can work that hard for this much stress. And so that's when I was like, okay, what is Megan's right personality? Let me go tend to people of whom much is given, much is expected. I was like, all right, I'll go get a degree in social work. So that I did. And then I went and worked in Chapel Hill at a domestic violence clinic organization. I can't remember how many years, 5, 4. At which point I was on call all the time and I was our Spanish speaker. And then Benicio was born and he did not want to eat. The child was born lazy. And then they were like, we're gonna get you. Anyway, it was looking bad for that kid. And then there was a lot of attention needed, whereas the only Spanish speaker for a while at that clinic, I was also carrying a pager. So then I was just responding to too many things. So I figured when this job came open at the Lighthouse, which apparently when I learned about it, it had already almost been offered to someone else. But I said, look, there's a combination of my degree in social work, which actually had a focus on nonprofit management, and my curiosity about humans and humans throughout history and time, that I said, you know what, OBC, I am a perfect combination of what a lighthouse keeper needs to be. And by the way, Luis is handy. So hire us together and we just won't go anywhere. I don't know whether they believed me in terms of our competencies or whether I just said, and if you give us the job, we won't quit. Because as a person who now manages humans both at the lighthouse and at the school, not having to rehire them is a very handy thing. So I'm not sure how it was that they said, okay, Meghan, sure, come on. But that's the story of how I ended up in this office. But also, it's so cute. Would you quit if this was your office? No.
No.
Cheryl, you're muted, but I'm happy to answer questions.
There you go. Megan, great presentation. You're always so much fun and always have been very inspirational. I love oral histories about living at the lighthouse, about the keepers, families, and so forth. And was it 2004 that Outer Banks Lighthouse Society visited you? You were about to have Paolo?
So Paolo's born in 2006 and he's born in November. So I think that's the year y'all came.
And that must have been 06 then. And yeah. I'll never forget, we got there and you were barefoot. You had this dress on and I thought, oh my God, she is very pregnant. And you were there in the middle of the group and just so animated and so full of energy, like, you know, it was so much fun. And then when you had finished your presentation, I think Beth went up to talk to you and you said, oh, I just wanted to get this presentation over and go have this baby.
Well, that's funny because I think you all came because you tend to come in October.
Yes.
Back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And so then
it was September, October.
We had a staff party on November 9th. So it must have been a couple weeks after y'all were here. But so when Benicio was born, from the time I went in active labor till the time he was born, we had passed 3 calendar days. I don't know how many hours it turned out to be, but it was ridiculous. So then I go to this staff party at the Sanderling and I'm in active labor, or I'm not in active labor. I'm having regular contractions, I guess. But I'm like, look, y'all, quit worrying about it. We're going to have a party because this baby's not going to come for days. So fine, we have a party. Everyone's freaking out because every year I write a poem to summarize the year. But I have to stop to get through my contractions and then get back to the poem and get back to my contractions and get back to the poem. And I can tell everyone is freaking out on me. I'm like, y'all chill out. I got this. So then I make Luis drive me to Elizabeth City. I get to the hospital. I say, hey, I'm going to check into a hotel. I'm in labor, but it'll be a couple of days. And they hooked me up to all the machines. And the woman was like, what are you talking about? You're in active labor. And 45 minutes later, Paolo was born. So it's a good thing we made it to the hospital. Although it's a good, my children, you know, there's that saying, like, if someone tells you who they are, believe them. That has been absolutely true with the birth of my children. Benicio was like, I may or may not try. I may or may not get it done. 3 days. And Paolo's like, boom, 45 minutes. I'm here. What are we up to? So since the beginning of time, their personalities have been evident.
That's fun. It's really nice that you shared put the personal touch on it, because I know you work very hard at your job and very dedicated. So well, yeah, you make a great lighthouse keeper.
Well, thank you. And it is a funny thing because I think a lot of people think of lighthouse keeping as a retirement job. And it just turns out that that is not. As you all know, there is too much work at a lighthouse, particularly one that is open, in our case, 260 days of the year to the public, as these days more than ever, a very popular location. Then it is indeed a all day, not all day, it is an everyday job.
It's a lot more than just carrying oil up to the lantern room and giving tours and turning the light switch on.
Not to the work that those guys did carrying oil, because I know, in fact, a lot of our records, they're like, I'm working 120 hours a week. This is ridiculous, which does seem ridiculous. But yes, it is not in our case just sitting outside and occasionally greeting someone, which maybe if we were at the end of the earth would be, but we're not anymore. At least not for a couple months of the year.
And so, Aida.
Yeah.
Megan, what is the current focus of your research?
The current focus of my research is to stop researching, to stop it, to knock it out, to sit down and write. I don't care if there's more to know. I know it. I can't. If there's one thing you learn in a master's social work program is it doesn't do you any good to know information if you're not contributing. So that is my biggest problem these days, to be like, nobody talk to me. No, I won't for you. And no, I won't for you. I have got to get these. What I would like to do is get my biographies shored up. They're done. They're written. I just literally, since I wrote them during COVID lockdown, have not gone back to look at them. So I would like to get that done. Once I get that done, I absolutely have enough information to publish a book, whether it's a pretty book or an informational book or a have pretty pictures on your bedside table book. I don't know. But those are my next two chunks.
You need to talk to my hubby.
Yes, I know. I have chapters outlined, and then I could do more chapters, and then I could tell you more and more and more. There's a cool database these days that I would have so much fun working with, where you have a circle and you can have some information, and then you can click that circle and there can be more circles with information. And if you're that interested in them, you click one of those circles and you can bunny hole down there. And that is, of course, the problem with over researching, is that then you're like, oh, but I just want to get you over here too. So maybe one day I'll just print a whole database where you could click circles if you cared enough. And if you didn't, just look at the biggies. Anybody else?
I think Travis has a question.
Oh, Travis.
Hey, Megan, you work for, a nonprofit that has some mission-based work with protecting natural resources, which I always find the intersection of environmental justice and whatnot and historic preservation to be quite fascinating. And I think in terms of coastal North Carolina, those two movements are closer together now than perhaps some periods in the past. And you've talked a lot about the trees that you all have lost in various storms as of late. Has there been any documentation on the loss of trees, or which trees are left? Similar to, like, you go to a battlefield, the witness trees are becoming quite popular now to point out which trees witnessed this battle or historical event. Just wondering what your research has been like for, the topography of your site, since you've all reclaimed the site, and how you've been writing that down for the future.
Interesting. So most of the trees that have fallen down for us have been red maples, which we know were transplanted by our board, just, I think, to get them some shade when they were here in the 80s, just working with no HVAC and no running water, to try and get some shade on the site. So none of them, I think it is fair to say that none of them was here in like the 70s, but were here by the 80s. And these red maples, they do pretty well in the swamp surrounded by others. But if they're out here sort of solitarily hanging out, they're very easy to tip. I mean, they tip a lot in the woods too, come to think of it. But they just have real wide roots and then they just tip over. So no, to answer your question, I have not done a lot, mostly because I think sometimes as an organization, I'm a little, you would think that I'd be a tree hugger, but sometimes I'm like, get these trees out of here, either for historic reasons or because they're too close to our buildings. So sometimes when they go, I'm like, okay, well, there they went. And luckily didn't crush our buildings. So that's where we are. And those pines are driving me nuts, even though other people are fine with them. I just feel like I want fewer pines, but we don't actually lease the property where the pines grow. So I just grump about them.
Any other questions? Anybody? Comments? It looks like we're,
We'll make one comment, and that if you haven't heard the interview that Megan did with the U.S. Lighthouse Society, that was very interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah, a lot of different questions, but similar. But it exposed how experienced you are and educated. I was very impressed. So,
Well, thank you.
that was a great interview.
I enjoyed that too. So, Megan, thank you so much for sharing so much of your life at the Lighthouse and your work and your time. We really do appreciate it. And
It was my pleasure.
well, anyhow, I hope that you have a very successful year I know that you're coming to the close of this coming year. When do you close for good?
So we always used to close right at the end of November, stay open for our birthday and call it a season. But last year, because we didn't open until September, we stayed open for some hours in December. We learned when does that work and when it doesn't. So and just in terms of numbers, like 25 people came to climb today. So not a big day for us, but still worth being open for 3 hours and paying somebody for 3 hours of their time. So we have very limited hours, Thursdays and Sundays, and then longer days, Fridays and Saturdays through December, except for Friday and Saturday happen to be Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. So closed then all the way through the 2nd of January. And then we'll stay closed until mid-March.
Right. Okay. So anyhow, we hope that you have a good rest of the year. And
Well, thanks for inviting me. And of course, it's fun to see all of you.
right. So we shall see you probably sometime after you open in March. Okay.
Very good. We'll have a free climb day, and we'll probably just call it a free climb day and not a climb for a donation day, even though we'll be tough and hit you up for one anyway. But that way more people will come. I'm sure I've already set the date for that, but it's usually around like that, whatever that Saturday is near March 19th, 15th, somewhere in there.
Got it. Put donation jars and jugs at every landing.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
All right. Thanks so much again.
Okay.
And
Bye, everybody.
thank you everybody for being here. It was great seeing you. Okay. Bye.